Well, this week we are continuing with the brands of Bond. What are we focusing on this week? Mason and Sons, with an interview with David Mason himself. Welcome back, everybody. David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience, and we are talking about the brands of Bond. You know what this is all about. It's about extending the knowledge and the experience of these brands that have a connection with James Bond. A lot of you know Anthony Sinclair, the suit, the man, the tailor. You also know about Mason and Sons now, the company that's been connecting all of these really incredible brands, mostly British, to really focus on extending our experience around them. Now, today, Blair Ballard, yes, our intrepid reporter about town, about the world actually, snagged an interview with David Mason himself. Why don't we take a look?
Thanks, David. Hi guys, Blair Ballard here once again for the Bond Experience. Welcome to London, or to be more specific, welcome to Montague Square in Marylebone. Interesting place this. Across there, Ian Fleming lived after he was demobbed from the army after World War II. Across the road there, Peter Sellers, the world's greatest comedian, lived with his mum. But it's this building here we're most interested in. Previous occupants include John Lennon and Yoko Ono, who photographed their naked album cover in one of the rooms upstairs. Ringo Starr. Paul McCartney had a recording studio in the basement, and Jimi Hendrix and his manager both lived there with their girlfriends. But we're more interested in the current occupants. David Mason took the reins of Anthony Sinclair, the tailors, way back in 2012. And for the last 5.5 years he's been wowing us all. He's an absolute gentleman. We're about to go have a chat to him. Let's go and say hello. David, thank you so much for joining us here on the Bond Experience. I know you're a very, very busy man.
It's a pleasure.
Now, for most of us in the Bond community, your strongest association is with Anthony Sinclair. For the uninitiated out there, can you explain who Anthony Sinclair was and his connection to the Bond world?
Yeah, Anthony's was a legendary Savile Row tailor. He wasn't based on Savile Row, he was actually based on Conduit Street, which runs perpendicular to Savile Row at its northern end. And in the 1960s, he had a client who was a film director, Terence Young. And Terence was given the job of knocking Sean Connery into shape for the Bond films. And he taught him how to walk and how to talk and what to eat and where to drink. And the icing on the cake was to take him to his tailor, Anthony Sinclair, to have his suits made.
Terence Young was an Irish Guardsman, wasn't he? And
He was, yeah.
Kind of informed the cut of the suits that he made.
Well, there were a lot of military officers who went to Anthony Sinclair for their mufti. He didn't make their uniform. Mm-hmm. It was their out-of-hours clothes that he made, and they had a very distinctive look about them. It's a very natural shoulder, a roped sleeve head. Mm-hmm. There was quite a degree of drape in the chest, slight suppression in the waist, slight flare over the seat, so you've got this very elegant hourglass shape, which became known as the conduit cut, given the address of the premises.
Great stuff. And how does the conduit suit that Sean Connery wore in the 60s and 70s differ? Well, it differ from the suits we have today, the modern kind of fashionable cuts we have now. What's the difference?
Yeah. Well, the conduit cut has evolved over time, and Anthony made Sean Connery's clothes for all of his appearances as James Bond, from Dr. No in 1962 through to Diamonds Are Forever in 1971. So if you look at the tailoring over that 9-year span, it does change. I'm sure Connery's body changed as well.
We all do.
Yes, yeah, but the lapel widths got a little bit wider and a little bit narrower, then wider again. The shoulders came in, went out a little, cut a little closer to the body in the later films. Mm-hmm. But those hallmarks, that soft natural shoulder, the rope sleeve head, that drape and shape, as Anthony Sinclair called it, it was evident throughout all of those suits, and we try our very best to incorporate those elements into the suits that we make today.
Now, how does, I mean, because obviously you can come and have a bespoke conduit cut suit made here at Masons and Sons. How does it differ from the original 60s one? I mean, is it you got the wide lapel, the higher button stance, little details? Is that right?
Yeah, of course we have to move with the times, and if Anthony was with us now, I'm sure he would be cutting a more modern style, because we've got to suit the needs and demands of our customers. And certainly coats are a little shorter these days. Trousers are slimmer. We get very few requests for pleated trousers, although that is starting to change very slowly. And the rise on the trouser is much lower today than it was 50 or 60 years ago. And the whole thing's generally cut a lot closer to the body. There's nowhere near as much drape. Not many people want that at the moment.
Sure.
Perhaps they don't have weapons that they need to conceal.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, if somebody wanted to come in and have a screen-accurate Connery suit, a conduit's cut suit, they could do that if they wanted to?
They can, and they do.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes, but that's generally for the real enthusiasts who want every detail to be perfect.
Sure. Moving on to current times, what are your feelings about Daniel Craig's tenure as Bond and the wardrobe that he's been given?
Well, I like it because I think it mirrors the original. The grey suit, the white shirt, the dark tie, the neatly folded linen pocket square, even midnight blue dinner suits are reappearing.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the things because I think the original Dr. No suit, which you can still get from you can. I mean, there's the evening suit he wore in Quantum of Solace apparently echoes that with the gauntlets. Is it the gauntlet cuff or the no gauntlet? I'm not an expert, but the blue, the midnight blue in the Thunderball evening suit is slightly lighter, and I think that echoes the one that he wore in Skyfall. Obviously, you mentioned the greys. I mean, the shark skin is such a Connery suiting that's an iconic suiting for him. That's been echoed again, as you mentioned, in some of the Skyfall suit, for example. But there's the Glenurquhart check. There were some herringbone suitings as well. We've seen
all classics. Really.
Are there any particular sort of pieces from the Bond back catalogue that you'd like to bring back or bring into Mason & Sons under your umbrella?
Yeah, we would. There's a particular suit or a particular fabric that Connery wore a lot in the Bond films that I'm particularly fond of. It just isn't that popular now. It's the grey flannel suit. Okay. And it's a beautiful thing to wear in the autumn, winter, or the fall. And very, very soft, comfortable. The problem is that these days most people want a four-season fabric because they're walking from one air-conditioned environment to another, and the temperature is the same 365 days of the year. So flannels have got, even though they may not be particularly heavy, they've got a very warm hand to them. It's a cosy suit to wear. Yeah. And I think some people think that it'd be a bit too hot to wear in most months of the year, which it could be. They're also relatively high maintenance. You've got to keep on top of flannel suits because it is a soft fabric. But I love them.
But it wasn't the case that back in the 60s, I mean, the conduit suit fabrics were considered lightweight. It was considered a lightweight suit. But now, looking back, what we consider a lightweight suiting is much lighter than the sort of the fabrics used in 60s.
It is. We don't really sell anything over 10 ounces these days. And just in my brief career, it's gone from 13 to 12 to 11, and people want lighter and lighter fabrics all the time.
You've also been involved in several projects. I mean, obviously, I think the first thing you did was the Connery suit for the 2012 commemorations.
We did, yes. We were asked to contribute a piece or two to the Designing 007 exhibition, and that was a sort of celebration of 50 years of Bond style, and I think in recent years the people who've been making the suits have made multiples, and there are always sort of spare pieces around or to be found that could be gathered for an exhibition such as this. But of course, back in 1962, there was just one of each piece made, and they've disappeared. So we were asked to recreate some of these iconic garments. One was the Dr. No dinner suit, of course, the first thing that you ever see Bond wearing on screen, and then the classic three-piece Goldfinger suit.
Iconic, absolutely. Is that your biggest seller, do you think? Your biggest, is it the biggest draw or the conduit cut?
Well, it's probably the solid navy two-piece conduit cut suit, because it's just the easiest thing to wear. It's the most versatile suit you could have in your wardrobe. You can wear it anywhere, and it's very easy to coordinate it with shirts and ties. You can wear the top half of it as a blazer if you needed to. So it's I think it's always the first place to start if you want to put a suit into your wardrobe, whoever makes it for you. Start off with a solid navy. And
solid advice. Yeah. Some of the other projects you've done, you did for the Aston Martin Centenary, you did the cavalry twill trousers that Connery wore in the Switzerland scenes, which I thought were fantastic. Yes. And the Schlesinger, the heritage Schlesinger jumper that Connery wore for the golfing scenes in Stoke Poges. Are there any other projects in the offing? Have you thought about any other pieces you'd like to do a similar treatment to?
Yes.
Can you reveal anything at all?
I could, but I'd have to go.
Okay. I remember one time I came to visit you, in fact, and you were finishing off a meeting, and you were talking in talks about having the polo shirt that Connery wore underneath the Schlesinger jumper. Did anything happen with that at all in the end? No,
we launched the Schlesinger sweater as a limited edition piece, and we weren't sure how many we would sell, but it was very successful. And I thought it was only fair to those people who had committed to buying it at the beginning, because it was our first step into bringing another brand into the family, as it were, at the time. It was only Anthony Sinclair 4 years ago when we introduced that piece. And that was the sort of us bringing other brands such as Sunspell and John Smedley and Sanders onto our e-commerce platform, and these are all products that have been worn by James Bond and other famous actors on both on and off screen, and that idea was well received.
Is that something that really informs your choices? I mean, I was going to ask you about how you decide which brands you want to bring onto your portfolio. I mean, you mentioned Mr. Fish obviously as well. I mean, he gave us the cocktail cuffs. But are there any other brands you've got your eye on that have the Bond connection you might want to, or is it again something you'd have to kill me for?
I'm not sure there are many left now. We only want to sell British brands. We sort of nailed our colours to the mast on that.
Good thing too.
So you probably won't find us selling Tom Ford.
But I was trying to think of other projects you could. I mean, because I missed out on the cavalry twill trousers, but I was thinking as a compliment you could have the barleycorn tweed jacket that he wore for the.
Yes, no, that is something that is coming through and we'll be launching soon.
Ooh, now that's great news. Yeah, that's good news.
We've had a lot of requests.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. I mean, it's an iconic jacket. I mean, that picture of him leaning against the Aston with the Alps behind, that's an iconic shot. So that's something I'd be very excited to look into as well. Fantastic. Now, on to other Bonds. I know that you've got dear Sir Roger Moore was one of your clients.
He was. Yeah.
Matt from for Suits of James Bond wants to know, because you went down to Monaco, is that right? To go
Yes.
and are there any stories you can tell, or is it?
Well, he used to come here for fittings as well. I'd see him in his hotel in London, and then I did on occasion go to see him in his apartment in Monaco. You're going to have to give me a moment to think.
Okay, no worries. But he's just such a nice guy. I never met him, but he did chat to one of my friends in Switzerland, he lives in Switzerland, and he mentioned my name. He said, "Oh yeah, so I know he knows more about Bond than I do." He's such a nice guy. I think he says it to everybody, but he's such a nice chap.
Yeah. I mean, every moment with him is joy. It's very difficult for me to think of a specific funny moment, because you wouldn't stop laughing as soon as he came into the room. You know, it's most charismatic, entertaining man.
Yeah, but also the story about George Lazenby has an intimate connection with Anthony Sinclair, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's quite extraordinary. He was very keen to get the role, even though he hadn't formally been offered an audition. So he gate crashed the casting, and he went to Anthony Sinclair to see if he could find a suit that he could wear for the audition if he managed to get in front of the casting directors. And apparently there was a suit that Sean Connery hadn't picked up for one reason or another. So he either bought it or it was loaned to him, and he wore that to get in front of the people who were going to make the decision, and clearly it worked. He got the job.
Now you're looking for James Bond. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And more recently as well, haven't you? You've been doing some work for George Lazenby.
Yes, we made a very nice dinner suit for him for a red carpet event in Norway last year. I think on Her Majesty's Secret Service had been digitally remastered, and this was the premiere.
So it came full circle, and is back in Anthony Sinclair again.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! Now looking to the future, you have fairly recently, back in February, I believe, opened Masons and Sons in New York. How's that all going?
Yes, yeah, it's going well. I mean, I've been travelling there a long time, probably 25 years now. So I've always had a lot of customers there, and it's always been trunk shows. So I'd be setting up in a hotel for 2 days and then moving on to the next place, and then bringing everything back to the UK and then packing it up and shipping it out again. So it's very nice to have a permanent location there, and particularly with the made-to-measure and the special orders that we do now, in addition to bespoke, we need to have the try-on garments and all the fabric samples there. So great that they're in one place.
You've got a base.
Yes.
When we talked a while back, I mean, back to referencing obviously John Lennon and Yoko Ono having lived here amongst others, that you were looking at trying to get a site in the Dakota building.
The Dakota, yeah, that would have been perfect. Yeah.
Well, I was talking to one of my friends who was saying, well, they wouldn't let John Lennon stay in the Dakota building probably now because it's so reserved, but that would have been absolutely fantastic.
Wouldn't it? Yeah.
With Daniel Craig now having his last film.
Sure it's the last one?
Well, he said he'd slashed his wrist the last time, and then on the Colbert show on Monday he said, no, it's definitely just one more to leave on a high note, and so on and so forth. How would you dress him if you were given the chance to do just the suits? Maybe how would you approach that?
Good question. I think the current costume designers got it just about right at the moment. As I say that, those sort of styling cues from the early films, I think have worked for him. He's a different size and shape to Connery. I don't think he's going to be able to wear the same style that Connery did with the same effect.
There was talk before we found out about Daniel Craig staying on for one more, that they were, if they got a new actor in, they're going to reboot the whole franchise again and take it back to source material, back to Ian Fleming, back to the 60s. Now that would have been maybe even more attractive for you as a...
Indeed it would.
Yeah, that would have been fantastic. Put him in a conduit cut suit, or... I mean, how do you play that?
Yeah, with great relish, I'm absolutely sure. And he's still driving a DB5 now, isn't he? So there's something magical about that period of time, and it's not just the Bond movies, the films that Steve McQueen and Michael Caine and our other heroes starred in during that time were really just quite fantastic. It's a great period.
And to go back would be amazing, I think, as well. I mean, it might have been a flight of fancy on on the part of Bond fandom to kind of to fantasize about that. But I think it would be a great, it's a nice slant anyway. If you could sum up the experience you get coming to have a suit made at Masons and Sons that makes it a unique experience, how would you describe that?
Well, I think the difference between having your clothes made and going into a boutique and buying off the rack is that you are the focus of attention, and we're making precisely what the customer wants rather than trying to sell him what we have in stock. So there's a lot of focus on the individual and satisfying his needs. There's no compromise. You'll get whatever you like if you can afford to pay for it. So that's one important aspect of what we do as tailors and other tailors in London and around the world do. I think what is special about this building particularly is its history, which harks back again to that golden age of British popular culture, the late 60s and early 70s, and to be sitting here where Jimi Hendrix penned the Wind Cries Mary and John got busted for drug possession. It's an interesting place to be, and if you're not a Beatles fan, you're a Bond fan, then just diagonally opposite here is where Ian Fleming lived when he was demobbed from the war. So we've got a 007 vibe permeating through the air here as well.
Absolutely, and this is, I don't say one-stop shop, but this is a place if you want the Bond experience. This is possibly the ultimate Bond experience to have, because you can have your conduit cut suit, the Goldfinger suit, you can have all of the other Bond bits and pieces. So, I mean, if Connery was around today as Bond, he could do far worse than coming here and getting all his bits and pieces. David, thank you so much. You're a gentleman and a scholar. It's just very kind of you to let us into your home, and thanks again. And back to you in the States, David.
That was great stuff, Blair. Thank you so much. Thank you, David Mason, and I'm sure there's more to come. Seemed like there were some hints in there that there are some big things on the horizon, so we're all going to be looking forward to that. Anyway, this has been David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience, and we will see you very soon. Take care. Oh, hey, you're still here. I didn't even know. You listen, while you're here, if you want, so I would actually go to this button right here and click on it, because then you actually subscribe to our vlogs. It's amazing. You get to see all the upcoming stuff first. You get notifications. It screams at you while you're at work. It's absolutely amazing. Just click on this button, hit subscribe, just move your cursor, move